This is Corncod, one of Nationalist News and Notes. Well, it's become apparent that since very early today, that the Nationalist party in Austria, the Freedom Party, has triumphed in their legislative elections, beating out the center right by somewhere between 2.5 to 3 percentage points. They're not going to necessarily lead the country because they don't have enough seats to rule unchallenged, so they're going to have to be in a coalition. But still, it's the best result for the that the Freedom Party has ever had. They've been around for many years. And they've just been gradually doing better and better, especially as sentiment gradually goes against the unrestricted immigration and admission of migrants to the nation of Austria. You know, I get really mad at folks trying to imply that the Freedom Party is some sort of National Socialist organization. You know, there was an article in Politico saying, "Oh, a party founded by Nazis after World War II." Well, any party founded in Germany after World War II had Nazis in it. I hate to tell you this, Politico. And the interesting thing about that is when the Freedom Party was founded, it wasn't founded by nationalists. It was founded by European-style liberals. In other words, what we would call in the United States pro-business libertarian types. So to say that it was founded by Nazis really is an untruth. It only later, much later in its history, under the leadership of Jörg Haider, when it started to become a mildly national conservative political party. And so, congratulations to the Freedom Party and Mr. Kickle, their leader, who did an excellent job in the run-up to the elections. He's used to be a close associate to Haider before his unfortunate death in a automobile accident many years ago. All this comes on the heel of triumph for national conservative parties in Europe. The Alternative for Germany, another group falsely linked to so-called Nazis, did very well in some state elections in eastern Germany. They managed to take Thuringia, coming in first place in that province, or state, and they came very close to winning both in Saxony and Brandenburg. So the Alternative for Germany is doing very well. And one thing that didn't get much attention, the Czech ANO party, ANO, which means yes in Czech, did fantastically in their regional elections. You know, for their political subdivisions, where they took nearly all of them. That party is led by Andrej Babiš, who was briefly prime minister a few years ago. And so sort of like his Slovakian counterpart, Mr. Fico, uh, he's returning to office after, establishment liberal misrule. So things are going very well in Europe, and of course all this occurs within a context where nationalist, national conservative, and right-wing parties did fantastically well in the EU elections a few months ago. And the National Rassemblement took an unprecedented number of seats in France's National Assembly elections. So it seems virtually every election now in Europe for the last several months has shown great victories for parties that you might say are to the right of the center right. A lot of left-wing and establishment observers keep on calling them far right, far right, far right. When, they really aren't ridiculously far right. None of these parties that I've mentioned thus far in this recording, you could say, are truly, truly far right. It's only because they only seem far right because the center right in Europe has been so leftist for so many years. Exhibit A in that argument is the Christian Democratic Union in Germany, which was led for many years by Angela Merkel, which essentially ruled as a leftist party. And you could say that very much about the Les Républicains in France. You could say that about the Conservative Party in Britain, which is essentially the second Blairite party in the United Kingdom after Labour. So, the media trying to portray the people and leaders of these parties as being some kind of extremist, that's not so. There are some very, very hardline nationalist parties in Europe, but they haven't done as well. Like Orban actually has Orban in Hungary actually has a political party that's in competition to his own Fidesz. It's called Homeland, I believe, in the Hungarian tongue, and they pick up a few seats in the Hungarian legislature. And it's good that these more hardcore nationalist parties exist because it keeps the national conservative parties honest. Same is true in France, where parties like Reconquest, led by Eric Zemmour, take a much more hardline anti-immigration position than does National Rassemblement, or National Rally, as it's known in English. So there really is great sentiment in Europe, and I think behind most of these victories is the sentiment that something has to be done about migration and immigration in Europe. I mean, we've already seen instances, very modest instances, of establishment left-wing parties beginning to make some concessions on the immigration issue in order to try to stem the tide of the right. Mr. Scholz in Germany recently upped up border guards, upped the number of border guards, and now if you want to go from another EU country into Germany, you're going to have at the very least, a brief conversation with a border guard, where that wasn't true for many years. And various governments in Denmark, for example, left-wing governments, some of them quite left-wing, are beginning to take a more restrictive attitude toward immigration. Now, I don't trust these parties. I don't trust Olaf Scholz. I think Olaf Scholz is an idiot. But the European political establishment is either going to have to relent on the one issue of immigration and migration, or eventually they're going to lose all their power. And I think I see them as being extremely stubborn. And so I see eventually these nationalistic parties rising in Europe. You know, I've been talking about and writing about the rise of nationalist parties in Europe since about 1989 and 1990, when I was writing for various publications in the United States. I was writing an article about the rise of these. I remember telling one group of people, a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of nationalism. Well, I don't call myself a prophet or the son of a prophet, to use the biblical quote, but I don't think it took a genius to figure out that it may have taken a long time for the anti-immigration sentiment to rise in Europe, but I think it's inevitably rising, and it's only going to get more powerful over time. So either the establishment parties in Europe are going to have to either relent or be crushed. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all works out. This is Corncod One of Nationalist News and Notes, signing off.